Hi all, today we will discuss top 50 real-time Redis cases with the Spring Boot implementation interview question. So how we will use Redis case in a Spring Boot? So what all are the question interviewer will ask? So these all are the 50 questions which is very important to prepare for the interview. So there are multiple categories are there in that. So first is basic related interview questions for the Redis case. So what is the first question is what is Redis and what are the main features in Redis. So Redis is an open source in-memory data structures stored, user database, caches, message brokers. So its main features include support various data structures such as string, hash, list, sets, and a store sorted sets and all. So this is the first question, like what is Redis and how are the main features? What all are the main features and all? Coming for the next one, how does Redis cache work? So Redis caches work with storing frequently data access in memory, allowing for fastest retrieval compared with query to database. The next question is what is Redis cache and how does it integrate with Redis? So we will integrate a Spring Redis cases. So what is a Spring caches and how it is integrated with Redis? So how we will use this Spring cache is a modules of the Spring framework that provide caching abstraction. So integrate with Redis to Redis cache manager, which allow use to Redis as a cache provider. So mostly we used Redis cache managers, which will be integrated with this Spring caches as with the Redis cache. Coming for the next, how does how do you configure Redis in a Spring Boot applications? So we will configure Redis, either we will use a form.xml or build.gradle. There we have to use spring.redis.host as a local host, and then port number we have to define here. So where we will do this one, in this application.property or YAML file. Coming for the next, what is the difference between cacheable and caches evict annotations in a Spring? So cacheable is used to indicate the result of a method call should be cached, where cache evict is used to remove all the entry from the cache. Now the next question is related for intermediate questions. So the sixth one is how do you handle cache expiration in Redis? So cache expiration in Redis can be handled by setting a time of live for each cache entry. This can be done by cacheable annotations expire after write parameters or programmatically use Redis command like expired. So this way. The next question is explain the concept of cache evictions policy in Redis cache. So cache eviction policy determine how Redis caches manage the memory, decide which key to remove and which memory is full and not. So this is LRU based, like least recently used, and LFU. So LFU least frequently used. Now the next question is what is Redis pops up and its use cases? So Redis pops up is used for the publishers and subscriber. So it is a messaging paradigm where senders publisher send a message to the channel and receiver subscriber listed to the channel. Coming for the next, how do you enable Redis Sentinel in a Spring Boot application? So Redis Sentinel can be enabled in a Spring Boot applications by configuring the node. So in application.property file, creating a Latitude connection factory and Redis connection factory bins for the configuration. The next question is what is Redis cluster and how does it is ensure high availability? So Redis cluster provide distributed implementations of Redis that allow the data to be automatically shared across the multiple node. The next question is related for advanced question. So the next one is how do you monitor and manage Redis is a production environment? So Redis can be monitored and managed using tools like Redis CLI, Redis Sentinel, Redis clusters, third-party tools like Redis Insights, Parametheus, Grafana, Metrics, and all. The next question is explain the cap theorem and where does fit for it. So the cap theorem state that a distributed system can be provided only two out of the following three guarantees: consistency, availability, partitions tolerance. Redis is generally configured for availability and partition tolerance for eventual consistency. The next question is what is the different data type supported by Redis and how are they used in caching? So Redis support various data type including a string, hash, list set, sorted sets, bitmap, hyperlogs, and geo partial index and all. The next question is how do you implement distributed log using Redis in a Spring Boot application? So distributed log can be implemented using Redis by libring a syntax command to set a key it does not already exist ensure automatically. So the next question is how what are the benefits and drawback of using Redis cache? So there are multiple benefits and drawback. So benefits using Redis cache include low latency, high throughput, support for the complex data structures, and all like that. So the next question is how do you ensure data consistency with Redis cache and underlying data? So data consistency can ensure using a strategy like write through, write behind, caching aside patterns and all. Next question is how do you use at the rate cache put annotation? At the rate cache put annotation is used to update the cache with the method return value. Ensure that cache is synced with the method result without impacting the method. How to handle cache synchronization is a distributed system using Redis cache. So cache synchronization in a distributed system can be handled using different technique like distributed log, pub sub mechanism and all. Now the next question is explain the concept of cache sharding in Redis. So cache sharding involve splitting the cache across multiple Redis instance to the distributed the load and increase the capacities and all. The next question is what is Redis persistence and how it can be configured in a Spring Boot. So Redis persistence involves saving in a memory data to disk to ensure data durability. The next question is related for practical questions. So how to integrate a Spring Data Redis in a Spring Boot? So if you want to integrate a Spring Data Redis, the integrated integration involve adding a Spring Data dependency configuration, Redis connection setting, and defining Redis template beans. The next question is how what are the benefit using latitude over Redis for the Redis in a Spring Boot? So latitudes latitudes is a scalable Redis client supporting both synchronous and asynchronous database. Which support a received programming. Redis is a simple synchronous client. The next question is how do you configure multiple Redis cache in a single Spring Boot? So multiple Redis caches can be configured by defining multiple Redis cache managers beans with a different configuration specifying them using cache manager. The explain. The next question is explain the cache config annotation and its use in a Spring Boot. So caching annotation is a class level annotation in a Spring used to configure common cache settings such as name, cache manager. And all. The next question is how do you implement Redis based rate limiter in a Spring Boot annotation? A Spring Boot. So Redis based rate limiters can be implemented using Redis command like incr and expires and all. The next question is, what is the best practice for designing cache key in Redis? So best practice include using meaningful and consistent key naming conventions, avoiding long key in incorporating version and all. The next question is, how do you handle failover in Redis cache in Spring Boot? So failover in Redis cache is handled by Redis itself through the automatic node promotions and data replications. The next question is, how do you implement cache warming in a Spring Boot application? So cache warming involve preloading caches with data before if needed it needed. So this can be done by loading data on application startup or periodically through the scheduled task. The next question is, what is the purpose of caching at the rate caching annotation in a Spring? So at the rate caching annotation allow combining multiple caches operations on a single method, such as at the rate cacheable, at the rate cache put, at the rate cache evict and all. The next question is, how do you ensure the security of data stored in Redis? So security can be ensured using Redis authentication. So required pass enable TLS, SSL and now we'll go for the scenario based interview questions. So the next question is, describe scenario where using Redis cache. Redis as a cache significantly improve application performance. So in e-commerce application, using Redis to cache product details, user session, frequently data access like category listing, and significantly reduce the database load, improve response time, enhancing overall user experience and all. So in that cases, mostly e-commerce based applications we are using Redis caches. Now coming for the next one, how do you handle cache validation in multiple node in a Spring Boot? So cache invalidation can be handled using Redis pubs up to proper invalidations message across the node. So at the rate cache evict annotations is there. Coming for the next, what are the potential issues of using Redis in a distributed cache and how do you migrate them? So potential issue include data inconsistency, cache stem and network partitions. Migrations strategy involve using distributed lock implementers cache protection. Sorry, example request coalescing and all. The next question is, how do you implement session management in Redis in a Spring Boot application? So session management with Redis can be implemented using a Spring session. So add a Spring session Redis dependency configuration, Redis connection settings, and use the at the rate enable Redis HTTP sessions, which store the session data in Redis. Coming for the next, explain the role of Redis template in a Spring Data Redis. So Redis template provide high level abstraction of Redis operation, supporting various data type and simplifying common tasks like setting, getting value, executing transaction and working pubs up. Coming for the next, what is Redis pipeline and how does it used in a Spring Boot application? So Redis pipeline allow multiple command to be sent to Redis in a single request, reducing round trip latency in a Spring Boot pipeline can be used with Redis template by executing multiple operation within Redis template dot execute pipeline. Coming for the next, how do you use Redis for distributed caching in microservice architecture? So Redis can be used distributed caches in microservice by centralizing caches management, ensuring each service can access shared cache data and using PubSub or distributed log for cache cache coherence across service. Coming for the next, describe the process using Redis for event sourcing in a Spring Boot. So Redis can be used event sourcing by storing event and they occurred using Redis data structures like list or stream. The next question is how do you use Redis stream in a Spring Boot application? So Redis stream can be used for data streaming, event-based, event-driven architecture. So in a Spring Boot, use REST template or a Spring Data Redis to interact with a stream, consuming and producing message with high throughput and persistent. So the next question is explain the use of at the rate enable caching annotation in a Spring Boot. So at the rate enable caching is used to enable a Spring annotations driven caches management capacity capability. It allow use to caching annotation like cacheable, cache put and cache evict in a Spring Boot. Now we will go for the integration question. So how do you integrate Redis and with a Spring Boot of cache sync configuration using YAML? So integrating Redis by adding dependency configure connections string in application.yaml and defining Redis cache management manager. So application.yaml Spring Redis host, localhost and port details. Now coming for how do you use Redis as message broker in a Spring Boot. So use Redis pops up messaging by using REST template and message listener. Now the next question is what is the role of Redis message listener in a Spring Boot? Messaged Redis message listener and subscriptions facilitate processing the message publishing to Redis channel in a Spring Boot application. Now coming for the next, how do you implement distributed counters using Redis in a Spring Boot? So distributed counter can be implemented using Redis automatic operations like INCR, DECR, Redis templates and all. Now coming for what are the advantages using a Spring Data Redis repository? A Spring Data Redis repository provide high level abstraction of Redis data. Accessing simplified CRUD operations enable users data repository infrastructures with Redis. Coming for the next, how do you handle large object in Redis cache efficiently? So large object can be handled by compressing data before storing in Redis. Coming for the next, explain the use of cacheable with custom caches key generation in a Spring Boot. So custom caches can key generation in achieving by implementing key generated and specifying at the rate cacheable annotations. Now coming for the next, how do you implement cache aside patterns with Spring Boot application? So implement a cache aside patterns by clicking the cache before querying the data, updating the cache after fetching the database. Now the next question is what are the performance considerations using Redis in a Spring Boot? So performance consideration include efficient key design, proper use of data structures, minimizing network round trip with pipelining, monitoring memory management, and configure appropriate evictions policy to manage the cache. Now the next question is how do you troubleshoot common issue with Redis cache in a Spring Boot? So troubleshoot involve checking Redis connections, setting, monitoring Redis server logs using CLI, Redis CLI command line diagnostic, ensure a proper configuration of caches annotations and using applications log to identify the cache related issue. So these all are the Redis caches interview questions with the Spring Boot implementations. So top 50 real time Redis caches with the Spring Boot interview questions. So these all are the latest. So if you are going for the Redis caches with the Spring Boot implementations related questions, use refer the same link. So these all are the top 50 interview questions. Yeah. Thank you.